Good morning. Thanks for coming. Unite Nordic, it's awesome. 2 amazing days ahead of us, and a few things to talk about, and a few things to show you, and a little thing at the end. So this will be good. Thanks for coming. I know there's people from kind of all over Europe here, and probably a few other places. We got some Unity people, both from the Copenhagen office, but also elsewhere. So it'll be pretty amazing to hang out with you guys for the next couple of days. Well, actually, some of you for the whole week at the Nordic Game. Before we sort of show you tech, I just want to go through sort of 3 different things that I think are interesting or important to us and to you. First, a bit of the philosophy of the company, which we talk about a lot, but it's kind of nice to reiterate both to ourselves and to you how we think about things. Then a bit about the environment, the stuff that's around us, which is the industry, and then a bit about the future and at least the part of it that we can control. So philosophy. When we sat in that basement a number of years ago, it's actually been just over 10 years for me and even longer for Joachim. Nicholas, the third founder, as you know, he got kind of itchy fingers and left. He's actually sitting right here, and he's now an indie developer doing some badass stuff. You might be able to sneak a peek from him during the conference if you're lucky. But back in that basement, we were of course technologists, and we're going to build cool stuff. And the idea was that we would take all the entire world of game technology and put it into one very tight bundle and all this good stuff that we've come to love. But we always knew that we were not primarily a technology company as such, but that it was all about the tools, right? And being a tool for you guys and everyone in the world, and a disturbing amount of people to build things, right? And being a tools company is very different from being a pure technology company, and it sort of guides a lot of your thinking, and we've let ourselves be guided by that thinking. And apart from missteps along the way, I think we've really built a fantastic platform for you to be creative on top of. But even that, we kind of wanted to take it further, and we had big ambitious goals. Some of which we fulfilled, and many others we're still working on. And basically the idea was to take all this technology, build it into a kind of tools platform for you to build on top of, and use that to democratize the industry. And of course, this was kind of nutty sitting in that basement, but that's how things start. And this has kind of guided us the whole way. And then recently, I was so lucky that I met a guy called Ray Muzica, who was one of the 2 founders of BioWare. And I was explaining to him kind of what we were doing. And he knew of Unity as an engine, but he hadn't really realized this. I mean, he wasn't aware that it was such a kind of a strong thing. And he basically said, well, it's like a social movement that you've created. And you're a social enterprise, because I had been telling him about how we kind of wanted to make other people successful, not just ourselves. And it was very flattering and beautiful, and I kind of had to agree with him. But I must admit, this was not part of the original thinking. Like, we didn't think that far. And I don't think that was even really possible for anyone to see that far. So that's kind of the fundamentals, and I know you know them pretty well. So this has resulted in some amazing things. A fantastic community, which at this point has 1.8 million developers. It's actually even more than that. The numbers kind of come in daily. But more importantly, and something I'm much prouder of, is how people who use Unity, they keep using Unity. So in the last 30 days, we had 400,000 people create stuff with this platform, which is probably around 1,000 times this room, give or take, which is kind of badass. I'm from Iceland, as you probably have heard, and there's 300,000 people in Iceland, so that's kind of the scale of it. They and you, I mean, use the platform for like 5 million hours of creation, sitting and like typing and doing stuff, which is just amazing. Now, taking this and combining it with the toolness of Unity, we've done some really cool kind of things and beyond just the tech and there's that we created the asset store, which has really evolved into something that we hadn't even dreamt of. Again, I got to point out Nicholas, who kind of had the original idea and pushed us to do it. It actually took a number of years before we actually got there. And again, it's just really evolved into something that's amazing, and I have to brag about some numbers. So over 300,000 customers to the store, 7,500 packages that they can buy, and there's people, not just one, like several people who are doing $30,000 per month, which is making them rich. This is for themselves. I mean, we take our cut on top of that. No, it's just an incredible thing. And in fact, 10% of the people who are sort of actively selling in the store, 10%, are doing over $1,000 of revenue per month, which really means that 10% of the people active in the store are having their lives like significantly impacted, which is an incredible thing, and it's kind of seeding the community with so much energy and all these good things. And again, just some of the cool stuff in the store. We love it so much that we have to brag from time to time. All kinds of crazy things. But of course, the editor extensions are sort of where the magic happens. And how Unity becomes, goes from being kind of a tool to being a tool plus whatever the community has built, and how this all comes together in really magical ways. Tools to do all kinds of different types of games, tools to program without scripting, and all these things. So it's just kind of a tidal wave, and when we launched this, we thought this would be most useful to the indie developers and the smallest people that didn't have all the skill sets in their houses. It turns out that the big companies are kind of liking it equally much. So we see kind of everyone using these things. And again, the prices are extremely reasonable in the store, which again means that, whether you are working completely alone or in the biggest studio in the world, you're basically using the same things. Unity plus stuff from the asset store. And it's just kind of a beautiful harmonic thing to think of. Now, that's kind of Unity. The environment that we're in, and again, that's really the game industry, or at least that's what we care most about and are most excited about, and actually the place that has the most energy. So just a few trends. You'll know some of this, but I think as we were thinking a lot about this in the last year or so, we realized there were some interesting ways of slicing the data that might be surprising. So the explosion of smartphones. If you go back, this is not a smartphone, it's a computer. The Apple I was released in 1976, and it was produced in 200 examples, so 200 units. And then during the winter of 2011, 2012, we had what we can now call the peak PC moment. When the world had the most PCs. This is not the number that's dropping really, but the sales are dropping dramatically. So the install base is leveling off, and eventually it'll probably, at least coast, at best coast. So we got to 1.5 billion units in 36 years. If you look at the smartphone revolution, the first smartphone, depending on how generous you want to be to the Nokias of the world, it sort of came out between 2003 and 2008. And at this point, we have 1.5 billion units, which again means that it's on this rocket curve where we'll go to 6 billion units, and the whole thing will have taken 15 years. So twice as fast, 4 times as large. And if you do that math, that's 8 times faster growth. And if you look at the sort of the S curve of adoption of this, we're sort of entering the sharpest incline right now. This is creating amazing opportunities, and many of you are taking part of them. And we're sort of providing you with tools along the way. Just another way of slicing this data is the revenue of this sort of top revenue of games. This is just a combination of public data and estimations and things we've been able to glean. In 2008, the top grossing games on the App Store were doing $1 million, $4 million, 15, 30, 80, and the estimate for this year is that at least one game will make, actually it's probably more now, 400 million, which is amazing, especially considering that the cost of producing these games isn't going up that fast. This is very good for the top grossing game. What about the others? And we've been sort of collecting some data where it shows that very clearly that independent developers are more successful than the established ones. Of course, the independents who are really successful quickly become established, but that's a separate story. So if you look at activity by engagement of different apps, established game developers versus indie game developers, this actually drops in 2011 and then it comes right back up in 2012. We don't have data for 2013 yet, but by all accounts, it's kind of still at least not getting worse and possibly getting better. That's our sense. The other is by revenue. When you look at the top 20 games, the top 100 games, and all the others, how they are sort of splitting the revenue. There's probably a bit of a reversal right now, but it's still not. It's still gotten better over time, which means that the tail is fatter in some ways. Again, this is interesting for some people, but we're all challenged, and it's a very competitive market. I'm not saying it's easy. It's clearly extremely hard. But there's a last thing that, this is mostly public data, but there's a last thing that I think is really interesting. So I was so lucky that I kind of heard Nolan Bushnell, the creator of Atari, speak. And he was talking about kind of how all entertainment is driven by kind of innovation and how entertainment changes over time. Not just graphics and stuff like that, but sort of the whole thing, the design of entertainment, how the user experience is, and so on and so forth. And because all these things are driven by innovation, it means they also kind of have a half-life where things get outdated. And if you look at the different forms of media, and I think it'll be clear why I'm saying this in a bit, but if you look at music, there's music that is really old that we still love, and some music kind of starts sounding dated after 10 years. So very roughly, and of course it's completely individual, you can say that music sort of has a half-life of 10 to 100 years. This is bad news if you're playing the guitar, because it means that you're essentially competing with the Beatles at this point, which is tough. Film is a bit better. Some action films start looking dated after 5 years. A lot of movies start looking dated after 10. And of course, we still have classics we love, but the fall off is actually quite rapid. Now, games in the traditional game industry. I've asked around, and I think it's reasonable to say that the half-life of games is sort of 2 to 3 years. Big console titles, they look fine for a couple of years, and then they start showing, creaking. And after 3 years, relatively few games actually look fresh anymore. Now, in mobile, it's even more rapid. Actually, some mobile games, you kind of feel their age after 6 months, and there's very few mobile games that don't feel old after a year and a half. Again, doesn't mean there isn't a library of old stuff that's awesome. But it just means that for sort of normal consumers, there's a pretty rapid or very dramatically rapid fall off. And this is again not just graphics, although that's a big part of it. It's how social is implemented. It's how you charge to your gamers. It's all these things coming together. The conclusion of this, I mean, this has some interesting repercussions. So one of them is that again it basically says where the power is. So in the music industry, since the library, the big fat library, ages so relatively slowly, it means that the power is really with the people who own the library, because they really, they can live long from the old music. But the shorter the half-life is, the more power the creator of that media holds. Because if you think about it, whether it's in the platform or the publisher, he has to keep coming back to you guys who are creating the games every 6 months, right? So you still have a tough spot, every 6 months where you have to kind of make a good deal and you have to find a way to make money and all this stuff. But essentially, even if you fail that, he still has to come back 9 months later or 12 months later, which puts kind of all of us in this room into this amazing situation where, if we can keep fresh and make fantastic games, we can really be kind of in the room and at the forefront when things are being negotiated and when things are going down. It's actually very different from the other industries. So I've been thinking a lot about why the game industry feels so fresh and energetic, and I really think this is a big part of it. So it's the environment. the future. Of course, the future is long and unknown, but there's a few things that we can control because we decide, and we can kind of do the things we want. So a few things, kind of right now, the very short term, and the somewhat longer term, or actually the very long term. So this year we have a few foci in the company, things we want to do, and one of them is increased quality. Sounds very basic, but we've actually spent a crazy amount of energy on this. At this point, a third of the engineering team is QA people, automation, build machines, having test suites, so we can catch much better all the problems you find and get them fixed. So this has been a huge initiative in the sort of last year and a half, and we're still pushing very hard on that. It also means, of course, adding features and pushing further ahead and continuing, this what we call the AAA initiative, which is taking really advanced features and getting into Unity, and we're working very hard on that. Connected but different is faster releases. So we saw sort of over time that we were sort of slowing down. Every release was coming out a bit longer from the previous one than before. So we decided to kind of reverse this. We had even found, in cases that, a bug that got reported got fixed. From that fixing moment, we saw examples where we had 9 months before we could get it out to you guys, which is terrible and embarrassing. So we've been changing our kind of build process and how we develop software, and as you've seen since Unity 4, the releases have been coming at a faster pace, and they're still a few months apart, and I don't think we get to nightlies, but at least we're really pushing in that direction of getting faster. And the third thing is more platforms, because this industry is getting kind of crazier and crazier at a increasing speed. So there's more and more platforms with new and different opportunities. And not all of them have equal amounts of opportunities, but it turns out there are some opportunities on pretty much every platform. And we've gotten pretty good at this. So sort of in the interest of challenging ourselves and helping people out capturing the opportunities, we've really pushed hard to add platforms. We're also in this lucky situation that all the big platforms want to work with us now because they want access to you guys, basically. So Sony is engaged with us on a deep level. Nintendo did it last year. BlackBerry did it earlier this year, and we're talking to a lot of other people. And the basic idea is that by working with the platforms, we can be really sure that not only can we build good tech, but that the platform is supporting us in getting it to you, and they are really committed. So if there's problems, they will help us fix them, and so on. And the result is that we feel really good about kind of this very, very broad platform support, which gives you flexibility. So when there's an opportunity, you can move very quickly. This is short term. Actually, we'll probably continue this for a number of years. But there's a longer perspective, which is the forever perspective, right? And we always had this idea that we really have to think long term at Unity, because once you build first your kind of learning on Unity, and then possibly your career and possibly your studio, that's a really long term commitment. And we have to kind of deliver on that by being there, hopefully forever. And that's how we structure the company. We really try to make everything so that it lasts. We try to solve problems properly, not just sort of do quick fixes, and are always really both looking long term, but also making sure there's lots of cash in the bank, and that we won't sort of topple over, when we move too quickly somewhere. So we're very careful about that. And stability is the primary one. Culture is the second, which is really, kind of this attempt at being very open, being very honest, and being really connected to you. And of course, the Unite conferences are kind of a primary part of that, and we bring some of our best people here, and you'll get to engage with them and hang out with them and tell them what you think is wrong, and we actually try to listen, and we're getting better at that. So that's really important, and I think some of you have known us for a long time, and I hope you feel, and I think you will feel, that when you spend time with our people, they're pretty much the same now as they were years ago, have the same agendas, same vision, and still really care about making this good for all of us. The third thing is, it's very nice to be there forever. It's very nice to be nice, but it's useless if we don't have a velocity and if we are not relevant and good and getting better. So something connected again to the faster releases, connected to all these things. We're really trying to be a company that accelerates rather than decelerates. We're now almost 300 people, but the feeling is actually that we can actually do things faster now than we've at least done them for a long time. It's hard to compete with the speed of 3 guys in a basement, but we want to basically approximate that or be as close to that as absolutely possible. So that is sort of the surroundings of this. We got some tech to show you. Unity 4.2 is not releasing today, but it's in the lab and it's getting ready. And Lucas is going to tell us what's in there.
Hello, everyone. So everything David said was true. We're working on Unity 4.2. It's in the works. It's currently in the beta program. And today we'll be giving a little bit of a sneak peek to take a look at some of the improvements and some of the features that you can expect to find in the release. So with that out of the way, let's dive straight in. The first big feature is Windows Store apps. It works just like you're used to from our existing iOS and Android publishing support, and it allows you to create these, publish your games or whatever content you have, and have it be possible for customers that want to play them on Windows 8 or on these tablets like the Surface and the Surface Pro to be able to consume your content. It works just like the other ones. There's an item in the build menu, and it works just like that. We're very happy with it. Then we have Mechanim Avatar Creation API. That sounds cool. So in Unity 4, as I guess most people know, we spent a lot of time at incorporating this Mechanim animation technology in Unity. And one of the key features of this animation technology is its ability to take an animation that was made for a certain character. Maybe you got it from the asset store, or maybe your animator actually made it, and to actually be able to play back that animation on a character that has a different skeleton. That is the key part of the Mechanim technology. And what we're doing with Unity 4.2 is we're removing the restriction that you need to have access to this new skeleton at the point in time where you make the build. So that means that if you are making a game, maybe an MMO, and you want to offer the player of the game the ability to have like a character customization tool where they can themselves decide, with what kind of character they want to play. Maybe, they want to make him very tall and skinny or very short and big. You can have the player create his own character, and then still at runtime, you can use the Mechanim technology to set up the retargeting onto this new skeleton that the player of your game created just moments ago. Another one, anti-alias render textures. So I guess most people here know what anti-aliasing is. It basically makes computer graphics more nice. It's all these jagged edges that you have on the edges of your geometry, and it kind of smooths that out. Unity has always allowed you to render like that when you render to the actual main screen, but never when you actually render into a render texture. And with Unity 4.2, we're enabling that feature. And this is especially nice, for instance, if you want to use Unity to drive the visuals for something like a VR headset, like the Oculus Rift. That thing you put on your head when you're like immersed in the world. Because the way you would use Unity to target a device like that is actually through a render texture. Like you have the Unity scene rendered to a render texture, and that gets fed to the Rift. So in practice, this just means that if you like the Oculus and you want to use Unity to target it, using Unity 4.2, the graphic fidelity will just be much nicer. Stencil buffer access. It's this amazing graphics technology from the 90s that for some reason, I guess you never asked for it, and we had more things to do, but we figured it was 2013, this was probably as good as a time as any to put it in. It's this technique where you can basically tell the graphics card to not do something for all the pixels on the screen, but only affect a part of the screen. And you can use that for to achieve certain visual effects, or I guess in more cases you can use it as a performance boost, so that if you have a very a very performance-heavy pixel shader that you want to use to do a certain effect, you can use a stencil buffer to make sure that on the pixels where it wouldn't have any effect anyway, that you don't waste your precious cycles on it. Then we have shadow batching. Shadow batching is actually a performance feature that we added, which basically is the feature that Unity, when we find the objects that cast shadows in a scene, like Unity 4.2, it will just try much harder to find exactly the shadow casters that we could put in a single pass. So it reduces the draw calls of a shadow-heavy scene, and in the internal testing scenes that we've tried that had that were very shadow-heavy, we've seen the time that we spend in actually rendering the shadow casters to be cut roughly in half, and those apps to gain roughly 50% in performance. Again, that's for very shadow-heavy scenes. These numbers are always, they always vary from game to game, but you should definitely expect some serious performance improvements in shadows. On the topic of shadows, they're now also nice on the Mac. I've had the graphics guys try to explain me 3 times exactly what it was. Something about driver, OpenGL, OS X broken and now fixed, and now we fixed it. The end result is they used to be nicer on Windows than they were on Mac, and now they're equally nice. And it's because the Mac one got better, and not the other way around. We have a few more. Headless Linux player. So we created the opportunity for, the ability to publish to Linux, to publish a game to Linux. All the Linux people super happy. And then we heard back from a lot of people that said, actually, we don't want to use this to actually, ship the game to an end user. We actually want to run the Unity player like in our data center somewhere on the back end and have it provide some kind of back end functionality for my game. And then they had the problem, yeah, but that kind of doesn't work because Unity always throws up this graphics viewport, and our machine, maybe we actually want to run it somewhere in the Amazon cloud, and they don't actually have the capability of doing graphics at all. So what we did for a Linux player is that we added an option to it that it's possible to run it completely without any graphics output, so that it's much more easy to run it in typical Linux, typical Linux environments like data centers, the cloud, stuff like that. What else do we have? GC and audio are now friends. If you have a game that has a high GC load, previously sometimes it would, it could fight a bit with the audio playback. We made that much more friendly. So you should expect more smooth audio playback. And we actually have a demo. And for the demo, I'll invite Joachim Ante on stage, which instead of talking about features, is actually going to show some of them.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So in Unity 4, we added support for our Shuriken particle system for collision detection. We made a really efficient system for having a lot of particles that collide with the world. But what a lot of people also wanted to have is support for collision events, where you can have basically a callback whenever a particle hits a surface. So in 4.2, we added that. So I put together this little demo here. And there's a couple of rigid bodies that sit in a hinge joint that pushes them automatically back. And every particle that hits this surface, it will push the rigid body, it will apply a little force to it at the point where it impacts and then push it back a little bit. So it's a very, very nice little simulation. It's a very simple but very optimized API you can use. You have this on-particle collision function, and then we go over all the collision events, and we just add a force at the point where it intersects. And the good thing is you have access to all of that from your game code, so you can really deeply integrate that for whatever you want to do. So that's a really nice little feature we added. Another thing, we sometimes when you build a player, you go to the build settings, and you hit the build button, and then you find out, oh, I didn't really want to do that, so you want to cancel that. So then now you can click this cancel button. Yes. Yeah, so I mean, it's pretty cool, yes. yeah, so we added this to the build button, to asset importing, and basically all these operations that take a lot of time. So it seems like everyone understands why that is cool. So yeah, another thing we did is presets. So let's say you have some particles here, and you have your color over lifetime, and now we bring up the gradient editor. Now very often you want to share a lot of colors, like your animation curves or gradients or colors. You just want to set them up once, and then you want to reuse them in different places. So now we have these presets. They're very easy to use. You just click here. Now my particles become red, and then I can switch it back, and I can easily add new ones here. I can delete them. And it's just a very nicely integrated system. It's also fully extendable, so if you make an editor extension, you can integrate with the system. It works for colors, for curves, and for gradients built in. Yep. Next one. So with 4.1, we started adding something really important to the profiler. So we added support for the memory profiler, the detailed view. So you have this button here where you can take a sample. And when you do that, we collect all the information about all the assets and all the scene objects in your game. And we show you exactly where your memory is going. So we can see here we have 54.8 megabytes allocated for textures. And then we can go in detail into that. So we can see here, for example, there's a texture. It's this one over here. This texture, and it takes up 1.3 megabytes. So what we added in Unity 4.2 is this referenced by system. So basically it tells you exactly why is this texture actually in memory, because the reason it's in memory is because there's of course an object somewhere in the scene which references it. In this case, actually what is referenced is the material. So we can see here, this is the material. So the only reason why this texture is loaded is because this material is loaded. And then we can dig into that. So we can see here, the reason this material is loaded is because of this object. So we can zoom in on this one. So here we have our red object, and there's a couple more reasons, for example, this object, and so on and so forth. So you can very quickly dig into where most of your memory is going, and once you know, or I have a feeling about that maybe that's not quite right, that this object is loaded, then you can figure out why it's loaded, and then you can very quickly fix the problem. Yeah. Yeah, definitely very, very useful in practice when you try to actually ship a game. So yeah, the next thing, when you're working with transparent objects. So you have, let's say, this texture here. You see these white fringes here. And the reason that happens is because when you make a texture, you might have a white background over here for your texture. And when you then do alpha blending on this texture, you get these white fringes because these white pixels, they actually contribute to the image, and especially on a gray background that can be very visible and it looks kind of ugly. So in Unity 4.2, we solved this problem by simply adding a checkbox in the importer. So you can click on this button here, hit apply, and everything looks good. And of course also, because we know it's an alpha texture now, we can just display in the inspector, we can show it with a checkerboard texture, so you can much quicker preview how your texture actually looks in practice. So that's the demo of Unity 4.2. Thank you, and back to Lucas.
Thanks, Joe. So one thing since I think it's pretty cool that we do it, I always want to make sure that we mention all these features that we've just displayed in Unity 4.2, and actually also all the ones from Unity 4.1 for all the for all the people that ever bought a version of Unity in the 4X cycle. You get all this stuff for free. We think that's pretty nice. At least I knew. Oh, I wasn't fishing for applause. I'm sorry. So, these things, we went over the huge feature and improvement list, and obviously when we were, coming up with this keynote, we tried to pick, some of the more sexy ones. But actually, the Unity 4.2 and every Unity release is actually not so much about the big features at all. If you look at the time and the energy that the Unity development team spends, like the vast majority is actually not on like these big bullet point items, but it's on all the small stuff. Like we have hundreds of small improvements in Unity 4.2. We were trying to figure out when we were coming up with the slides for this keynote if we should try to fit them on here somewhere. I guess we decided not to do that. But there's so much small stuff that's going into the product, and each one of those changes on their own, they're not really worthy much more of a release note. But all of those fixes combined, they really help to move Unity towards the polished, stable product that we try to make it be every day. So that's the small improvements all over the tool, over all the different subsystems, and in particular, there's also many bugs that we fixed. I checked last night, it was 474. And for pretty much all of these bugs, behind every one of them, there is a user somewhere who has been friendly enough to take some of his time and let us know about the problem. We actually have this feature in Unity that you can go to the menu and there's like help, report a problem. And if you actually send us a bug like that, we actually look at them and they really help us to get rid of the problem and to fix it. If you're ever at home working with Unity and something goes wrong and you think like, oh, why didn't they fix that? Please, if you let us know about it, we can actually fix it. I know that there's many people here in the room that do this all the time, and to everyone I would like to give a big thanks. Especially to the people that go out of their way to strip their projects down into this nice little repro project so that we can actually make the product better. We really appreciate that. We wouldn't be able to make this product without you. So thanks for that. We're going to go back to David. Actually, one point of irony, I find there to be a nice irony in us spending so much time and energy on, on all this complicated stuff, but there's nothing that you guys appreciate more than the cancel button. It works on asset importing and switching platforms as well, by the way. It's not only building players. All right, David, all you.
I love it. Fantastic. So I actually failed to introduce Lucas properly. He joined Unity 4 years ago or so, and he was a developer, and then he was a lead developer, and then he built a couple of teams, and now he's running the engineering as VP engineering. So he is basically the boss of 100 people, doing incredibly, really ridiculously complex work. And of course, before that, it was Joachim, who is our CTO and one of the founders. But I think you may know him. So a couple of things to add. So going back to this democratization idea, in the basement, we put it on the wall. We wanted to democratize game development, and we wanted to have a big impact. And we always had this idea that if you're going to do something difficult with your life, you might as well, try to use it for something interesting. You might say the whole of Unity is like that, the way you can get it off our website and the community and all these things. But what I think was kind of the biggest thing, well, since the release of Unity anyway, was making Unity free, right? So we took the indie product, which was previously $200, and said now it's completely free. And it's not just sort of, free in some kind of suspicious, sneaky way. It's free in you can actually use it for commercial reasons, and you can make money. And if you make money, it's all yours, and all this stuff, right? We did this in 2009, and that was basically when the community went from 13,000 people to 1.8 million now, which is staggering. We've loved that thing, right? We're kind of today going to improve it a bit, some of it is pretty simple, right? So for instance, no matter how small your team is, even if you're just working alone, something like source control is useful. So today we're adding text-based serialization to the free product, so you can actually easily use it with version control. Also, it's 2013, right? So we're adding real-time shadows from directional lights to free. But we're also going kind of further. So as we talked about before, mobile is not the only thing, by the way. There's many other places that are interesting in the game industry, but mobile is important. So as of, well, kind of pretty much right now, we're adding iOS export to the free product. So it follows the previous license. So that means that with the free product, Unity, you can make an iOS game and you can make money from it, and it's your money and all that good stuff. And we're also adding Android export. And although it's currently in beta, we're also adding BlackBerry support. When it's out, which shouldn't be too long. And finally, we're also adding Windows Store apps export to free. And sort of feels equally giddy as when we did the free release in 2009. So basically, from a technical standpoint, what we're doing is we're taking all our basic mobile products and we're folding it into free, right? So follows the same license. There's no separate iOS Basic, etc. There's just Unity Free for all that joy. $1,600 worth of software being put into this package, and I think it's probably live on the store either right now or in a few minutes. So that's just wonderful, and we're of course looking so much forward to seeing how that affects the world. We're going right into the conference now. So this is Unite Nordic, which is a smaller format. I think we have around 500 people attending. But it's kind of more cozy. I think I have a lot more friends in the room that at other Unites, and I'm really looking forward to that. I've been asked for 2 housekeeping items. One is that after a talk, because we have a really tight schedule, when you want to talk to the speaker, which you should absolutely do, you should meet the speaker at the round bar, so-called, out front. And 5 minutes before sessions start, out there'll be a bell ringing, and that means you really have to run in because they should, we'll try to start them on time, let's put it like that. So with that, just welcome to the conference.